Hi, and welcome to MC Podcast number 30.
Ooh.
Number 30, Lynn. This is our 30th podcast here. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a big number to most people, but I mean, to me, I think 30 is kind of a big number. You know what I mean?
Kind of seems like we're seasoned at it.
Yeah.
Old veterans and
Exactly.
30.
Exactly. But I will be honest with you, it feels like it's more than 30. you know what I mean? I'm like, only 30? This is only the 30th one? So,
well, it seems like 30 to me. I haven't been with you on every one.
Well, I know. I get it.
You've had to put up with Kevin a time or two. You've had to put up with Kyle, even Cullen.
I know. Sometimes we just have to bring in the B team.
I get you.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it just is the way that it is.
Yeah.
You know, you can't have the superstars on the floor all the time together.
No, I don't think that would be wise.
No,
really.
no, it just really wouldn't be fair to everybody else, or even the rest of the world if we sat here all day and talked.
And hit a home run every time out like we do.
I know. It gives others a chance.
Yes.
It definitely does. So really, truly, you out there listening, this is episode number 20 of episode number 30 of the MC podcast. And my guest in studio today is Lyn Crabtree. Lyn, welcome again.
Thank you, Mark.
Good deal. Hey, what's been going on with the Crabtrees here lately?
It's all been busy. We're sitting up here, and this is well into November now, and we're still trying to. All the corn's in, production corn's in. We've got the production units fired up. They're running corn hot and heavy, and that's going really well. Best year ever for us in that regard. We've had a good year in terms of yields, and harvest was a few glitches, but not many. Yeah. And so overall, across the board, that was very good. But here in Southern Illinois, on the farm that I like to get my grandchildren out on, for farming and playing, we still got some beans in the field. And over the weekend, we've been trying to harvest beans. And this being Monday morning, we still, I don't know, we got between 150 and 200 acres of beans, and we're still throwing down a little cover crop, which is probably foolish this late, but we're doing it anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, you never can tell. I mean, we haven't had. I think we finally got our killing frost about a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, I still got turnips up in the garden, and my Brussels sprouts are still up. My tomatoes are all dead now, so frost got them. But they were going good up till 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, maybe putting a little cover crop down isn't as futile as we may think that it is.
We've got the full service ag is going full bore, and we're in the middle of our prime sales season. So it's a busy place around here, and a lot of things going on.
Definitely. Well, I had Kevin in on the last podcast, and I asked him this, and probably by the time this one airs, it will be afterwards. But Crabtree's got big plans for Thanksgiving.
We're going to Grandma Crabtree's. It's up in Central Illinois, up at Jacksonville, and the whole family is going to be there.
Ooh, doggy! Yeah, man, they got a place that big. I mean, because the whole family is growing here. What I mean?
There is hotel reservations made.
All right, there you go. So good. No, I think we will. By the time this airs, we will have had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I think. Got family coming up from Texas. Dad's coming up.
Oh,
so,
good.
Yeah, so we'll get to spend some time with him, and maybe I'll get a little work out of him. We'll see.
Let me know how that goes.
Yeah, I'll see how that goes. Absolutely, no doubt. So being that it is the end of November, and we are headed into December and January and into the winter months. I just wanted to spend a little time today kind of talking about what farmers needed to be getting done this winter, and especially with livestock. I mean, I guess dairy guys. What are some tips for continuing to keep up with cow comfort and and what we needed to be doing this winter, and so a couple of things that I can think of, and we can expound on these. But air quality this winter. How do we deal with air quality and ventilation? What about bedding? Temperature, natural light, all of these kinds of things. And Lyn, with your background, there are a lot of these things that you've seen over the years. Some things that work, some things that don't work, and so I just kind of want you to hit on some of those things for us today.
Well, if you kind of key me in, because I have a tendency to ramble.
No, that's okay.
So if you kind of keep me on task, along with all of the other things that are going on in the wintertime, we've got we got to keep tractors running. We got to keep water lines from freezing. We've got to, all of the winterizing of the machinery, the facilities, and all that kind of stuff. The goal here, and I think the things that you're talking about is reducing stress on the cows.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't really matter what time of the year or season of the year that it is. The goal is to reduce stress so that we can encourage, so that the weather conditions are not a limiting factor for milk production.
Right, exactly.
So I think that's kind of the goal in mind. But the game changes considerably from summer to winter, so to speak. Spring and fall, probably the most ideal times, because I'm going to draw on. I'm probably, Mark, going to draw on a lot of information that could be challenged, but that's information that I used as a consultant for the last, for a number of years.
Absolutely.
But if I remember correctly, a cow's temperature comfort zone is in Fahrenheit something between 40 and 75 degrees.
I think, yeah.
So between that 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, that is when a cow is in her ideal climate.
Okay.
So when we begin to run above that in the summertime, or we begin to run below that in the wintertime, then we have to take different measures to be able to keep the stress down on a cow and keep them at their best. Biggest issue that we run into, and a lot of things will kind of key off of this, and there are rabbits that we need to chase probably off of this.
We can do that.
But the big thing that we need to worry about is when we begin to close up barns and that kind of thing, we got to worry about ventilation.
Yep.
We got to worry about air exchange, air quality. I'm kind of drawing again on some of the things that I learned as a specialist, but I do believe that a cow in the wintertime is exhausting something in the neighborhood of 5 gallons of water a day just breathing.
Right.
And so when you put several cows in one barn together, and each one of them is exhausting 5 gallons of water into that barn air, you're talking about the potential for a lot of condensation.
A lot of condensation, and that condensation being able to in a warm, you lock all of that up, you get condensation, you're getting no air movement, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So here you are condensating that, and with all of those cows in a barn giving off thousands of BTUs.
Yes.
I mean, you're heating that place up with all that condensation. You're just asking for some bacteria and those kinds of things to be growing in the wintertime, right? I mean,
okay, so look at the facility itself.
Okay.
All right, and it may need to be that we put in some mechanical ventilation into a building to be able to move air through it. But for the most part, if we can use natural ventilation, that's what we want to do.
Yep.
But we should have a goal in mind of keeping the inside temperature, the outside temperature fairly close.
Right.
If we can keep it within 10 or 15 degrees inside to outside, we've got the potential to cut back on that condensation, to cut back on that stale air, that ammonia air that's beginning to accumulate. So guys are going to need to look at opening up ridge caps. They're going to need to look at opening up eaves, some of those kind of things to get air out. And if you've got side walls pretty tight, we need to be able to make sure, whether that's a curtain wall or whatever it is, that we can open that up and not be afraid to. Sometimes I think we think that we've got to warm these buildings up considerably, and I don't know that that's as big a deal as it is air exchange.
I think I would agree with you, and in fact, I think one of the great indicators of poor air exchange is condensation on the ceiling.
Oh yeah.
When you start seeing condensation on the ceiling, we probably need to open up some of those eaves, some of those ridge caps, lower a curtain a little bit to get more air moving through there.
Absolutely. So I know that most of our herdsmen are seasoned managers today, and they understand those kind of things. But we in the wintertime, we want to go in the house, and we want the house to be 70 degrees. Well, that's not what we need for our cows,
right.
But we do need to maximize that air quality, and perhaps we need to install some ventilation if we can, to force enough air through the barn to be able to keep that air quality engaged.
Definitely. No, we can definitely do several things there to help with ventilation. But I would agree with you that that ventilation is probably number one there.
I think that if we're talking about the ventilation and what that's doing is cutting down on condensation, reducing moisture in the barn, I think that we need to then begin to consider, what additional things can we do to reduce stress on the cow.
Right.
So, simple terms, and maybe this is too simplistic. I've always felt like cows need to stand for two things.
Yeah.
Cow needs to stand to eat.
Yep.
At the bunk, and a cow needs to stand to go to the parlor to milk.
Right.
The rest of the time, she should probably be spent laying down.
Okay.
Okay? So if that is true, then we probably need to provide a very comfortable place for her to be able to do that.
Okay.
Because we don't want her laying in the alley. We don't want her laying in the gutter. We don't want her laying in the manure. We don't want her building up, we don't want to deal with the somatic cell and the bacteria that is going to come from her laying in the shit. And so we need to make a comfortable, dry place for her to do that. Now, dry bedding in the winter is much more of a challenge than it is in the summer.
Oh, yeah, it is, especially for sand.
Yes. Well, for straw
or anything else.
Shavings or anything. But without getting into a great dissertation of what we prefer in terms of mats or sand or what types of bedding or whether it's pack or stalls or all that kind of thing, we need to provide a dry, comfortable place that she would rather lay in than lay in the gutter.
Absolutely, and because that's where she's gonna lay down. She's gonna be comfortable. You're talking about the somatic cell, but that's where she's gonna ruminate. That's where she's going to allow all of that feed to start being converted into the volatile fatty acids in her rumen. And she needs a place to be able to lay down and just sit down and let her body do all of those things without being uncomfortable. Because if she's uncomfortable, she's not going to process that feed like it ought to be processed.
Well, I believe that and I'm not even going to try to recreate this number, but there's an amazing amount of blood that flows through the udder to create a pound of milk.
Yeah.
And so when she is laying down, she is much more efficient at blood flow through the udder than she is when she's standing.
Yes.
So we want to make sure that we maximize that time that she's comfortable laying down. So if we're covering the challenge of additional condensation, additional moisture, uncomfortable situations, it's a little more challenging to provide that best comfortable place for her to lay down and to rest. And then we deal with the age-old problem of too many of us trying to cram too many cows in too small a space.
Well, absolutely, and not only does that affect being able to lay down and be most productive with blood flow and rumination and all that, but that affects bunk space.
Yes.
If I have overcrowded bunk space, they're not getting what they need.
Yes.
And let's just, the bossy cow is gonna get more than she needs, and the more submissive cow is gonna get less than she needs, and we're gonna severely affect milk production when we do that. So I think you're right. I think we try to cram. I think too many guys too many times, especially in the wintertime, think, well, I got to get them all in the barn here, and we end up cramming them up too much.
Well, you mentioned bunk space, and I think we're probably ready to move on from from comfort of the cow being in the stall, and if there's stalls, all of the different requirements that's necessary depending on the size of the cows, for the brisket boards, for lunging areas, for the depth. I mean, you want manure going into the alley, the gutter. You don't want it going into the bedding and all that kind of thing. But without getting into a great deal of statistics there, which vary from farm to farm. So you're talking about bunk space. One of the things that stick out to me is that it seems like, and maybe it's just the farms that I was always on, that everybody kind of had this 2 foot linear foot of bunk space for every cow.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a rule of thumb. And to me, that would vary whether that was a 1,100-pound Jersey herd or an 1,800-pound Holstein herd, which would be kind of a no-brainer. But I think one of the factors that not many people took into consideration was how frequently are you keeping feed in front of the cows?
Yeah.
Is fresh feed in front of the cows 20 plus hours a day,
right?
Or are we just managing to get feed to the bunk a couple of times a day, and they probably got feed out there for 4 to 6 hours,
right?
So the guy that's saying I got 2 linear feet, on my herd for bunk space, who's only keeping feed out there 4 to 6 hours, and you got the boss cows that are going to be engaging the bunk, during most of that time, that's not adequate.
No.
He probably needs 3 or 3.5 feet of bunk space.
At least 3.5. Yep.
To provide fresh feed. And of course, the goal there is to provide fresh feed because the ultimate goal is to reduce stress.
Definitely. Yeah. And you think about that and you think about cows being in a stressful situation. If you got a cow that's hungry and she can't get to the bunk, that's pretty stressful. I mean, what do we call it? We call it hangry, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not only, so it's a stressful situation.
And that gets crazy around here when you get this
you
bunch hangry.
About 11:45, you hardly even talk to anybody about, between 11:45 and 12 o'clock, unless it's, hey, where you want to go get something to eat, because you're going to get growled at. You know what I mean?
Especially that sales group.
That sales group, yeah, and the marketing group. They're just a bunch of nasties.
Of course, they're the ones that are going to edit what we're saying and not saying today. So
I know, but I thought if we said it enough, they couldn't edit it out.
You go ahead and step out there. I'll talk about the sales group, okay?
Sounds good to me. But you're right. No. So I think you're right. I think bunk space is one of those things, especially in the wintertime when we don't have feed out there 20 hours a day or 10, 12 hours a day. If it's just out there 4, 5, 6 hours a day, then we definitely need to make sure that we've got enough bunk space there, 3.5 feet.
When I was making recommendations on the farm, Mark, we was always encouraging fresh feed 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
Now you figure out how to get that done. Okay, so how long is your feed going to stay out there before it begins to get stale? You got a little longer window in the winter than you do the summer, but how long is it going to take for feed to stay fresh? So how often do I need to run feed to keep feed out there? 20 hours is a good time limit because that gives us some actually time to go to bed and sleep a little bit, between times we got to run feed. So I think that the thing that makes us successful in the wintertime is that cows are out of their ideal comfort zone when temperatures are below 40 degrees.
Right.
But our cows can consume more feed for the maintenance that's required, and they will. They feel fresh enough, even in the cooler temperatures. They'll go ahead and take on more feed. Where in the summertime, they're stressed. They're outside of their comfort zone. It's 95 degrees outside, and they like it at
75, 80
or less.
Or less. Yeah.
And so but they have a hard time taking on the feed to be able to manage the stress. So milk falls.
Right.
The wintertime, we can maintain some pretty good milk production.
Yes.
But feed consumption is going to go up.
Yeah.
And so it's more critical to keep that fresh feed out there in the wintertime so that we can maintain that higher level of maintenance on the cows it's going to take to be able to get enough dry matter intake in them to maximize milk production.
Definitely. I'd have to go back and look at some of our rationing programs. I wonder if our rationing programs take in outside temperature.
Well, you got to remember that when I was balancing rations,
it
was the old Spartan program, so it did not.
I was trying to remember that right off the top of my head. If some of the rationing programs took in for that, so that there would be increased. I'll have to go look. I can't remember.
I would have to use factors back then, to increase dry matter intake or decrease dry matter intake based off of weather. But it wasn't built into the software then.
No, because software back then was pen and paper. I'm sorry. I should not have said that. That was mean to treat somebody, with your age with less respect than what's due.
And wisdom.
In wisdom.
Yeah.
In wisdom, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I apologize because, one day I may be that old.
You can only hope.
I can only hope. Absolutely. Just kidding. So anyway.
We're talking about keeping plenty of fresh feed out there. I think we kind of covered the basis for that. We're reducing stress, and so we're managing to maintain those cows, the maintenance requirements that's necessary. They're burning a little more energy because it's a little colder, so it's causing a little more energy to come off of the cow. Fresh water. Always necessary.
Definitely.
We're going to want to, just because it's not summertime,
doesn't mean that she's not going to need water, especially if she's sitting there respirating 5 gallons of water a day.
Yes, absolutely correct. Without it, she's not going to perform at her best for us. Can she get to the bunk this time of year? You're talking about times of year when it's a lot more moisture, condensation. We got sloppier surface areas, how are we doing in providing for the footing for the cows to get back and forth, because we don't want it to be a challenge for her to get to the bunk. We don't want her to be challenged or stressed going to the parlor, so do we have good grooved areas, concrete areas, or is that slick, and that manure pretty slick, that surface pretty wet, and we've got her trying to sled to where she needs to get to and not really wanting to get up with that challenge,
Definitely.
that stress.
I think, I think sometimes, we just, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, things in the wintertime just get harder.
Yeah.
And those of us who have been out there to do it know that. You know what I mean? We know that things in the wintertime just get harder to do, and it's not as fun. Even we talk about the ideal temperature for cows being there between 40 and 75. Man, farming's kind of fun when it's 40 to 75 degrees, right?
Yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? Even for us, and so I think for us sometimes we have to go. I know this isn't fun for me to get out there and do this, but I've got to go do this to make to reduce the stress on the cow.
Well, see, we're here in Southern Illinois. The thing that we deal with a lot is mud.
Right.
We freeze and thaw. We can get just as cold as anybody, but then we'll, within 2 days, we're back up to 50 degrees. It's a unique climate here, and so we're dealing with that challenge. But what about the folks, our friends up north, that have got a pretty well tunnel in and tunnel out of the snow?
Yep.
You can't even get a milk truck in. They got to worry about all of those issues.
Right.
Can we keep the equipment running? Or we got to, we're that's not as big a issue as we're doing. We're dragging it through the mud. They're trying to get it through the snow.
Or down in the panhandle of Texas where they're worried about a blizzard blowing through and keeping everything cleared out because everything's gonna be completely snowed up. Or some freezing rain blowing in and all of that. So no, you're exactly right. So so we talked about ventilation and air quality. We've talked about bedding. We've talked about bunk space and enough feed that's available. We've talked about fresh water. I think fresh water is where we kind of left off, and the cows need just as much water when it's 25 degrees as they do even when it's 80 degrees.
So keep those waters clean. It's not as much fun, cleaning those waters out when it's when it's 10 degrees. But we got to make sure that we do that.
Definitely. All right. So what's the
surface area? Let's keep these surface areas with some traction so that the cows feel good about getting around on them. But besides that, we've got the normal issues with parasites. That we're wanting to control, keep our cows clean, comfortable in that regard, keep vaccination schedules up, and I don't know. I'm kind of running on empty right now. So.
Yeah, I'm just, we want to also make sure that there's some good natural light shining through.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah, good. Yeah.
We want to make sure there's enough light there that just, we feel better when we're in the sunlight. We feel better when it's not dark, and I think that there's something to that. I don't know exactly what that mechanism is in that cow and why it does that, but if we get some good natural light, then we know that the cows are doing.
And we're not always going to have natural light, but we're going to have to provide some light to keep her at the bunk and keep her maximizing dry matter intake, because light will help do that. We know that. So lights, timing of the lights. That kind of thing is important, critical. As
we get ready for this wintertime, there are an arm's length worth of lists that we need to keep. Keeping equipment up, keeping water lines unfrozen. And sometimes I think that we know a lot of times what we ought to do, but sometimes we just we have a hard time keeping all of it done in the wintertime.
Well, we run out of time.
We do.
We throw in the abnormal thing that we weren't planning on today, and we run out of time. But the better job that we can do going down that checklist of things that need to be done tonight before we pack it in, the better my day is going to go tomorrow morning.
Definitely.
The likelihood, the better my day is going to go when I get up tomorrow morning. Everything is going to cooperate.
I would definitely agree with that for sure. So we've talked a little bit, or we actually talked a lot about the dairyman. What about the guy who's got the beef farm? What are a handful of things that he needs to really be thinking about that maybe sometimes get neglected for whatever reason, that he needs to be thinking about with with those beef cows. And I guess when I say beef cows, I'm really kind of thinking mama cows, right? The kind of cow calf operation and the mama cows. So any tips for those guys? Anything you can think of that they really need to be washing? I think fresh water is probably one of those things. Would you not agree?
Oh, absolutely. The goal is still the same: reduce the stress.
Yeah.
Okay. Regardless of where that cow's at, whether she's nursing a calf or whether she's just, whether she's getting into whatever stage of gestation that she's in, that the goal is to reduce stress on her. So we've got to consider shelter.
Yeah.
Now, there's certain parts of the country where I think that shelter is a structure,
right?
That we can get them in and under. I think there's other parts of the country that shelter can just be a tree line or a bluff line,
kind of a windbreak.
A windbreak, yes. Just as an area that they can get out of. If we're putting up shelters, air quality is a big deal.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us don't have really well prepared areas for mama cows.
Right.
Beef feedlots a little different. We got better structures, better situations, better designs designed for air quality and air exchange.
I was thinking about this. These windbreaks, or at least something to a tree line or something like that was in the Panhandle a few weeks ago, and a guy just had square bales, big square bales, big square bales in blocking the north wind, and he actually had stalkers in there that he just needed a place for even those stalkers to get out of the wind, and it was pretty simple. Just put big square bales up to block the wind around that area. And so I think sometimes it can be as simple as that's going to make the difference between keeping the cows comfortable and keeping the stress down and not doing it. Because even a stalker calf, if they're stressful, they're not eating, they're not growing.
Mm-hmm. I have noticed that in my experience, and hopefully that was last decade's experience that we've moved on from that, and I know we got folks that are a lot smarter than I am that are making these decisions. But it seemed like that we had a lot more problems with energy management.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cow consumption.
Yes.
Going into the wintertime, we had a lot of. Let's talk about stalkers. We had a lot of situations where we had stalkers going into the winter on poorer quality forage, regardless whether that was baled or whether that was grazed or whatever it was, where that poor quality feed was barely gaining them a half a pound a day, and then we hit some bad weather for a couple of weeks, and they were going backwards. We weren't managing adequate energy supplementation. And so, some of the protein supplementation on some of our hay herds, some of the energy supplementation, some of the grazed herds, some of that, was critical and wasn't managed as well as it should have been.
Right, and I think that even happens with some of our mom cows. I mean, and especially if she's got a calf on her. And we think, oh well, this is I'll just put out a couple of these round bells and that'll be good. But but we're not managing her energy, and if she doesn't get enough energy, she's either going to milk off her back or she's not going to milk, and then we're going to have poor weaning weights.
We're not going to have poor weaning weights, but we're not going to get a rebred.
We're not, exactly,
because a cow in a negative energy position will not stick.
No,
we can breed her all we want to, but if she's in a negative energy position, it ain't going to happen.
No.
That's the beauty of what God's given, His creation, that cow going downhill isn't going to have a calf to try to maintain as well.
Yep. And so in a grazing situation, they need to be out there looking at the condition of that pasture. And let's be honest, that's not the funnest thing to do when it's 25 degrees outside, and or even when it's 40
blowing
degrees
snow.
outside and it's raining, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not. But we need to be checking on those things and think, not just think, well, when I saw it, it was okay. And looking at that for that energy balance, keeping them comfortable, when it gets extremely cold, some kind of windbreak, some kind of structure maybe, and then watching their energy balance, whether they're a mama cow with a calf, even if she's in the middle of gestation, she needs adequate energy, so that when she has that calf, everything's gonna just click right along with her, and she's gonna be able to produce milk and do that for that calf.
Absolutely.
No, so good. Well, Lyn, I think we've kind of given enough of those tips for today.
Okay.
And unless you can think of something else that we just absolutely need to cover,
I think it's been fun.
I think it's been a good time. So I'm glad you got to see me.
I am so glad too, Mark.
No, but I appreciate you coming in and talking through this with me, guys. You guys out there listening, we appreciate you listening. Remember, you can always find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube, and always you can find us at seedcorn.com. Thanks for listening.